10 years seems to be a lengthy transition period. Would it not be beneficial to work toward a shorter transition so the full benefits of the merger are realized sooner?
Yeah, and I agree, and I know the CJs agree, and I think the CA's leadership agree as well, but I think I've answered that in the first question. I think it will end up being shorter than that. Mm-hmm. In fact, internally on the work groups, we're talking about a transition on the management structure and governance and all that of 5 years, no more than 5 years.
One of the risks that you have in this type of discussion is that everything's on the table. You get paralysis by analysis and you start getting into too much detail. Something like this, I believe that in 5 years it's going to go away and we'll be focusing on the new designation and where its placement is in the community. So I agree with Colin. I think it'll go away.
I'll add, there's a few of us in the room that have been CMAs for a long time. 37 years for myself, and Jerry and Jim and others being members for a long time. That meant we were RIAs, and I was an RIA for 15 years before they changed the name to CMA, and then all of the RIA promotion disappeared, and it was CMA only, and it didn't take very long at all before people that were active in the employment world weren't referring to the RIA anymore. It's just at this early stage, they're just trying to, soften the impact of it in the eyes of some of the members that aren't supportive.
Are our dues going to be similar, and are they going down? So there you go.
We knew that was coming, but this is my own opinion. I can't see how ultimately that there wouldn't be a lot of gains in efficiencies and effectiveness that should, in my view, having come from 30 years in the business world prior to joining the society, I can't see how you shouldn't be able to reduce the dues. But right now the commitment is to work towards, over a 5-year period, having the dues the same across all three bodies. But again, I know in our BC work group, we haven't started scrolling down as how exactly would you do that. I mean, there's an endless amount of complications. Even in BC, you've got leased offices versus an owned building. You've got, this body's got that equity and this body's got that equity. And it's just endlessly complicated. So until you start doing all of that, which you're not going to do until you know that it's go forward. You've only got so many staff hours available, and we already are stretching the limits a little bit by forming all the work groups that we have. That's as close as I can answer that. Is the intent is first to try and make sure that all three accounting bodies at some point become CPAs with the same dues. And hopefully once that's done and everybody starts to work together and all the smoke clears on all these other issues, that they'll see their way to be able to reduce them. But you didn't hear that from me.
You just said cut the marketing budget.
Yeah. I won't be the CEO in 5 years, so. Why don't you answer that question?
It's been 5 years. That made me feel really good.
There's a comment to take Colin's thread of thought there, and whether or not the dues go down is the obvious question we all have when we pay our dues every year. But the other side of it is if we reduce the amount of advertising we do against ourselves, then for the same amount of dues, you would get better value as a member because we'd have more money to spend on research or professional development or whatever the case may be. So after you get through some sort of transition period, there seems, as you're saying, in terms of some gains to be had along the way, that we wouldn't be advertising against ourselves and you'd have more monies available for individual benefit.
I think it's hard for any one of the bodies at this stage to make a commitment to reduce the dues because each of the bodies really aren't in the business of trying to make a lot of profit. Like, I know our focus since I've been around, which is better part of 15 years, is we try to grow the society as much as we can by retaining the quality standards, and then we allocate the money back into services and continued prosperity and sustainability and PD and all the rest of it. So we're not trying to make big profits or surpluses, and neither are the others. So right now it's hard for them, without starting to work down all those details, to make a commitment. of what the end result will be.
Yeah, there's a consistent thread here of questions, and it's all about what happens if one of the partners doesn't merge. So, for example, within British Columbia, if CMA BC and CABC walk away from the merger, will CMA BC still pursue the CPA designation?
Well, let's take them one at a time. We're talking about, right now, our focus in British Columbia and across the country for the most part is a merger of the three bodies to become CPAs. It's already occurring in Quebec. If there's endless what-if scenarios, and you could go on and on. You can do it in BC, you can do it across the country. Obviously, the elephant in the room in Canada is Ontario. They have such a large membership of all three bodies. But we'll have to deal with them as they come along. But as far as, if I understood that comment correctly, if the CGAs and CAs in BC drop out, then there isn't a merger, there's just CMA, and we're not going to change our name.
This is about transferability. So how will this play out if the merger is not adopted in every single province? And for example, if we merge and everybody becomes CPAs, what happens if you move to another province?
Yeah. Gets messy, doesn't it?
Agreed.
That's an easy answer.
You know, Kevin Dancy, the CA's national CEO, I mean, he's a terrific guy and very talented guy, and we kind of decided early on that we needed one of the CEOs to run the meetings, so we let him do that. But he gets asked that all the time, and he just says, look, we all know what the challenge is to make this work. Now with three bodies, we have 40 jurisdictions across the country, 40. And so we know it's going to be messy. And it's like I said earlier, you can speculate forever on the what-if scenarios. What if BC merges and Alberta doesn't, Quebec is? We'll deal with them each one as we go. Right now our focus is to try and get some momentum to this. Alberta was the template. If, using BC as an example, if we could get this in BC, certainly some of the smaller provinces will feel, like Saskatchewan and others, will feel obligated to get in. They don't want to be the ones that are left out. But, you know, right now we're just trying to keep it moving along, and there's still a long ways to go. There's still a lot of challenges.
So on that note, Colin, maybe just expand a bit further, because one of the questions was, you mentioned how large even in the Ontario market was. So what happens if they don't merge and all the rest of Canada wants to?
Yeah, well, you know, obviously it would be really challenging for the merger to be effective if nobody in Ontario, none of the three bodies in Ontario go along. I don't know exactly how many professional accountants there are in Ontario, but I know there's 17,000 CMAs, I think 35,000 CAs, and I don't know exactly how many CGAs, but roughly the same number of us as CMAs, I think. So it's a huge number when you add them together. Obviously, they're key. So we just, right now, every province is working on their own, but we all still have the national organization, the national committee. That's, like I said, they're trying to merge the three national bodies as well, the three national CEOs and the three national boards. So the hope is that Ontario won't go their own way on this. There's a long way to go yet. There's a lot of work ahead.
Will we be able to vote for the merger before it goes through?
Well, the current thinking for the CMAs in British Columbia is that after all the consultation process, which we hope will be completed by the end of March, that we'll probably circulate a survey, and Vanita might want to speak to that a bit more, but we'll probably make a survey available to our members just so we can get them to tell us, now that you've had a chance to hear more about it, ask your questions, get them answered, how do you feel about the merger? Do you support it or not? We're not required to have a vote, and we could have a vote, and it wouldn't matter what the result is unless the government agrees to change the legislation. The government won't change the legislation just because we ask them to. Right now, they're aware that it's all three bodies and they want to see all three bodies merge, or at least that's the sense I get. The Deputy Minister of Advanced Education is Cheryl Wenazenki-Yolen, who's an FCMA. So she gets all the documents and she's very aware of it all. Ms. Yamamoto, who is the minister, is not an accountant, so she's relying quite a bit on Cheryl through this process. I have no doubt at all the government would want to see the three bodies. But like I say, we're not required to have a vote. We'll get a strong sense of feedback from our CMA members. So will the CGAs, so will the CAs. CAs may have to have a vote of some sort. We're not sure yet. That's still being looked at. But ultimately, when the three bodies get together and go to their respective boards, in the case of the CAs of council, they want to have a common recommendation to the board and councils that would then go back to the members and tell them, here's what the conclusion is, here's what we're presenting to the BC government.
And just to Colin's comment, as we were going through the consultation process, the biggest thing for us is we wanted to hear from our membership. I hate to tell you this, but I had a member call me about a year ago and say, is the merger still on, the one from 2003? So it's really important to get that feedback going. So yeah, we want to have a survey and we want to make sure that people have their input, they have their say. This is your designation, it's also my designation, and it's very important to have that on the table.
Can I just add that to Colin's sentiment in terms of getting the member interest? I think we're fairly consistent with the country in terms of CMAs across the country and how they're handling it as well. It's a fairly intense consultative process, which will be much more worthwhile in terms of the advisory vote, if you will, towards recommendation to government. So it's a fairly consistent approach across Canada.
And we definitely want to make sure that none of our members can honestly say they weren't given a chance to let us know what they think about the merger.
The SLP is one of the strengths of the CMA accreditation process. Is there room for it in the anticipated CPA education process?
Tammy can answer.
That's right. Well, I think I can vouch for the fact that going through the presentation when it was developed in terms of the CPA and the various modules, I think to meet all the requirements that I talked about earlier, I think it's fairly robust given the fact that they have to include the elements of the foundation elements as well as the specialty elements, and how they've incorporated a fairly rigorous exit exam, if you will, is an addition to what we have now. So I'm fairly confident that they've met those requirements. And again, at this stage, because certainly it's not spelled out from A to Z at the moment, but the question's a good one. I think it retains definitely a lot of the components that I talked about before, the management accounting piece, the competencies around problem solving, all the things that are near and dear to our heart.
If I could add, you've got three programs currently that each are very rigorous and quite a bit different in some respects. I mean, you're not going to take all three programs and add them together and make one great big new program that takes 8 years. And so that's why the plan is to try and pick the best parts of each of the programs. And the CAs have always wanted access to our management stream in our program. And the CMAs want to retain quite a bit of the strategy and management focus. And so before it's all finalized, that's one of our main interests. But it's very unlikely there would be an SLP program per se.
Is there any other comments from the table?
No, I certainly want to thank everybody for showing the level of interest that you have by coming out tonight. If you haven't asked a question tonight, or if maybe a question that's in your head hasn't been answered, don't hesitate to email us or call us or write to us, or you've got lots of ways to get a hold of us and ask your questions and get them answered. And we encourage you to do that. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.